Thank you, everyone, for coming to the Enclave Reading Series. Welcome. This is the 5th out of 8 weeks that we're running this consecutively, and then we'll take a break and start again several weeks after that. After today, the ensuing 3 weeks, the readings in order are by Will Alexander, Alice Notley, and Myung-Mi Kim, all at 1 p.m. Pacific time like this one, except for Alice Notley, since it's so much later in Paris where she lives. We're going to start that one at noon, 1 hour earlier. And so that would be 2 weeks from now. Okay, this reading series was begun in March 2020 by Jeanne, Heuving, and Ray Armantrout, and we are much in thanks to them for beginning this great project and then later allowing us to carry it on. And I want to just thank my colleagues here, Kenny Nathanson and David Weiss, who work very hard on this, and also let you know that all of the Enclave readings from when Jeanne and Ray were curating this to now and continuing on are available on the Chax Press YouTube channel, and you can still see those. And this one will be there probably within 48 hours, maybe even sooner. And I can, when the chat opens at the end of the reading, put that URL up for you too. Okay, I'm going to turn things over now to my friend Kenny Nathanson, who will introduce Mónica de la Torre.
Okay, thanks, Charles. And I want to apologize in advance. We seem to have caught or sustained the tradition of long introductions from Enclave 1. So this will be a few minutes, but I hope not too long. Apologies in advance. So I'm delighted to welcome Mónica de la Torre to Enclave and to have the chance to introduce her. De la Torre's books include Repetition 19 from Nightboat, The Happy End, All Welcome from Ugly Duckling, Public Domain from Roof, and Talk Shows from Switchback, as well as 2 books in Spanish, Acufinos and Sociedad Anónima. She's the translator of Defense of the Idol from Ugly Duckling by Chilean modernist Omar Cáceres and co-editor of Reversible Monuments, Contemporary Mexican Poetry from Copper Canyon. Born and raised in Mexico City, she's lived in New York City since the 1990s. De la Torre is a contributing editor to Bomb Magazine, where she previously worked as a senior editor, and she currently teaches poetry at Brooklyn College, a place with a brilliant track record for recruiting stellar poets. De la Torre's various books display remarkable range, but one thing at least the 2 most recent volumes share is a penchant for a kind of giddy, expansive proceduralism. They take a premise or parameter and extend it way past what we might have thought of as the limits of its applicability. The results can be explosively comic, but also revelatory. In The Happy End, All Welcome, the premise is itself something of a jaw-dropper. As De la Torre writes in a passage that sets the stage for the book, after Martin Kipperberger's installation, The Happy End of Franz Kafka, an assortment of numbered tables and office desks with pairs of mismatched chairs within a soccer field flanked by grandstands, which references a giant job fair held by Nature Theater of Oklahoma in Kafka's Unfinished America. That's the end of the quotation. Kafka's great outdoor Nature Theater of Oklahoma, Utopian American Promise, Whitman's Man in the Open Air, or Simulacrum, Macabre Recruitment Ruse. It's like a prefiguration of that moment where the disciplinary regimes of production make way for the ingratiating solicitations of consumer society and the profitable simulated individualism of lifestyle marketing. Workers, we're told at one point in the book, should henceforth be known as human performers. Here, job interviews take place characteristically in high-end designer chairs. The book's language both inhabits this world and extrapolates its unnerving lingo of supposedly people-friendly solicitation into far-flung and sometimes preposterous contexts. One effect, I think, is to explode the claims and pretensions of the lingo, opening onto a space beyond its tentacular reach. Often, though, the book's play at the limits of lifestyle's language games suggests something more unnerving, how pervasively these modes of speaking and thinking have seeped into and reconfigured realms of experience we'd like to think of as immune. Still, part of what makes the book such a delight is the way the investigator, a sort of Wittgensteinian language philosopher, does a gree-gree number on the language game she traces. Her wit and intelligence generate some breathing room, keeping the claustral qualities of the world they explore provisionally at bay. There's one short portion of the book, though, that feels like an escape hatch, evocations of New York that have a different feel than most of the surrounding material. And here's a few quotations. The city is populated by strangers who, upon passing others by, imagine various encounters with them. As soon as their eyes look, they flee embarrassed, seeking other strangers as the protagonists of their daydreams. The moods of those successively inhabiting the city give it different shapes, impossible to know which of its facets is truer than others. And the most common transaction in the city is the exchange of memories. These feel like itineraries in Certeau's sense, personal, often secret trajectories through the spaces and times of the cityscape, endowing the terrain with intimate pockets of meaning, memory, and desire, crossing one another in occasional mutual recognition, lines of flight, and unmapping of gridded, hyperplanned, surveilled space. Something like this is the terrain explored, I think, in De La Torre's remarkable new book, Repetition 19, a story in part of leaving Mexico City and making a new home in and from New York. One seed for the book is an enigmatic, opaque, but still haunting poem De La Torre wrote in Spanish soon after arriving. A love poem, maybe, or lament, or an adjuration to get the hell out of a bad romance. Haunted city landscapes, itineraries of desire. It turns out, however, that the poem is opaque to its author as well, as she sets about translating it into English many years later. So she tries something akin to consulting the I Ching, neither quite believing nor disbelieving the ensuing hexagrams, but letting them carry her and the poem into new unanticipated territories. She runs the poem through various translation parameters, monolingual friends as unlikely mediums, her own willful rewritings, a Google translator that turns out to be spookily prescient. As she casts the invitation to join in and play ever wider, and then mulls over and riffs on what comes back, lines of flight, alternative histories, and possible futures start to proliferate, Borgesian forking paths. Here, procedural parameters discover not blanketing constraint, but an unlikely invitation to freedom. At the book's exuberant close, De La Torre's public poetry project in a city park offers us the last glimpses of the poem's intimate, hermetic seed poem, as passerby agree to join in and take their turns at a whole lot of giddy poetry-making exercises, among them a rewriting of her poem. As its words come back to her playfully rewritten and revoiced through other mouths, in a kind of communal festival, the book ends on a note of joy and a palpable sense of shared liberation, partly arrived at, partly longed for, leading us out into the open air after all. Please welcome Mónica de la Torre.
Thank you so much, Tenny. That introduction was so incredible. I kind of don't want to disappoint anyone. I just want to say, have a lovely Sunday. Bye. Because you said it all so beautifully. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Charles, and thank you, David, and thank you all for being here this Sunday afternoon. It's really great to be here. I'm going to read from Repetition 19, but I thought before that I would read some relatively recent translations of a poet named Ana Hatherly, or as they say in Portuguese, Ana Hatherly. She was a concrete poet in Lisbon, based in Lisbon. She died in the early 2000s, did a lot of research in Berkeley on the Baroque, in the Spanish and Portuguese Baroque literature, and was also a member of POEX, experimental poetry in Lisbon. So her work is included in an anthology I co-edited of concrete poetry by women. It's called Women in Concrete Poetry, 1959 to 1979. And I had to excerpt some of the work in a series called Leonorana. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to show you the series, and then I will read you the translation. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And you can all see this, correct? Yes. Okay. So Leonorana is 35 different versions of a stanza in a lyric by Luis de Camões, as you can see there at the top. And then she tells us what each variation is. And so when I read you my translations, I will tell you what the variation is and what she's doing in it. But I just want you to see it. So at the top here, under Leonorana, you see the Camões. It's only 3 lines. And then you see the first variation, second variation, third. And then the poem gets progressively more concrete. And there's also asemic writing. So you'll see it now. So that's 9, 10, and 11. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, an empty page, 18, an emblem, 19, asemic writing, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, all the spaces between the words disappear, 26, similar, she's playing with Koenig, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. Oh no, it's 31. I said 35. It's 31. And it ends with a double acrostic. Morning happens when in the apparent movement of succession of days and nights, the earth all of a sudden shines on the sun, not so suddenly though, since the day happens slowly. Everything happens slowly, though only all of a sudden does it become real and sudden. Everything is what was happening slowly until the moment it burst into sudden reality. All of a sudden, it is morning, just like all of a sudden, water flows from the source, and is suddenly intermittent like the day. The source is a sudden intermittence, a phenomenon explained by the principle of the Pythagorean cup. And all the magic of a source turns suddenly into the flow of the larger pipe of a system of communicating vessels whose primed siphon allows for the passage of the lovely liquid from one vessel to another, existing due to its flowing and the origin of the flowing origin. And like Leonore, it is a product of the succession of days and nights and the fact that she rises from bed where she lay intermittent during the dark night, and suddenly the source, the day, and Leonore erupt. She steps on the cold ground vessel where the lushness is born, and at the tip of her fingers, the filaments of the leaves, veins shudder, and Leonore shivers and her nerves shudder until registering the sensations and the message of lushness is in the origin of her motor nerves, transmitting orders through her body, and the beautiful muscles of her leg bent backward, of her thigh upward, of her belly inward, of her shoulders forward, and of her head downward. And her orbicular muscles receive the message of lushness, almost shutting her beautiful eyelids, and her pupil contracts, and a tingling in her breast hardens the pink blossoms of her nipples. And all of this happens in the intermittence of the mechanism of sensitivity, solely because it is morning and the day rises and water springs from the sources, and there is lushness. So that's the first variation. And I forgot to read you the Camões. My apologies for that. So that would be all the variation of the following line by the following stanza by Camões. Barefoot she goes to the source, through the lushness, Leonore, suddenly she goes, but not surely. And the variation I just read, she describes as the first thematic elaboration, discourse without interference. It's pretty enigmatic. Variation 2, which is a variation of the first thematic elaboration with requisite rhyme. When Leonore, naked in the morning, wakes and senses that lushness, sister of the loveliness of sources and of lushness, reaches out her foot to step on the ground barefoot and shivers with lushness, From the loveliness of morning, the first gush from the source of lushness, her bare foot shivers from the cold like the faces of lushness, shiver opening their mouths to the cold breeze of morning, sure like the source, sure of the lushness of dawn and naked, like Leonor excitedly through the lushness and as lovely as the source, erupting all of a sudden like the day reaches out her bare foot to get up from bed from the deep of night, in which sleep, the sources, the lushness, the loveliness, and Leonor unsurely rises on her way to the lushness, and in the lushness gathers loveliness. She goes to the source naked. So then variation 3 is a synthesis of variations 1 and 2 with multiple readings. And this one is, it's very spare, you'll see. Leonor, when waking in the morning, was naked, sister of loveliness, of the sources, of lushness, then reaches out, her foot steps on the ground, barefoot, shivers. First, the breeze, cold, sure, the source, erupts. Suddenly, the day from bed, from the deep of night, the way rises Leonor. Variation 5. This is a maximum synthesis of all previous variations. The source steps towards the verdure, Leonor pure. So there she coins these portmanteau words. Variation 6. This is thematic and formal atomization. And so the words are spread out in syllables, broken up. Goes to the source, lovely and not surely, barefoot toward the Leonor, the lushness, and read goes. Variation 10, these are all neologisms and portmanteaus, and she describes this variation as unintelligibility becomes meaningful due to a process of harmonic sonorization. Honoros, candle goes, allscape, honorient, sparse, eolors, eolora, alsafa, alsavli, honoriuti, onilor, rodizi, leogur, honoralso, leorvili, alsa rose, lovelyful, paralina, seolor. Variation 11. She describes as a third elaboration, absolute circumscription of the theme's elements, process of removal of semantic content through syntactical alterations. Elements of the theme become autonomous. Barefoot, she goes to the source. Leonor through the lushness. To the source, she goes surely. Leonor and not lovely. She goes barefoot. Lushness goes. Leonor through the lovely. And not surely, lushness, and does not go to the source. Leonor goes, and she goes barefoot through the source, to the barefoot lushness, to the source goes barefoot, through the Leonor lushness, through the sureness, through the lovely, through the barefoot, through the not going, through the Leonor goes and not toward, through lovely, not to the source, and Leonor goes not lushness, through the barefoot to the sureness, and not to goes, not to the source, Leonor to surely, she goes to the not barefoot. The page that was empty is variation 15, and she describes as a thematic reformulation through absolute concretization. Visual elements semanticize the poem. Actually, I'm sorry, no. This is the one with all the letters that are spread on the page without, they're broken up and you can't really read any of the words. But the one that's completely empty is variation 12, and she describes it as absolute distancing from the image. Then I will read you variation 21, which is the one that looked like it had Latin script and it was all in caps. In the centuries AD, we see the transformation of the concept of space into aesthetic factors, allowing luxurious dislocations on foot, the automobile element used by evolved primates in the sector of successive forests, much appreciated for the epidermic sensation referred to as lushness, which provided individuals means of subsistence and of corporate organization, to which was attributed the designation of lovely obscure etima, whose adequacy was lost in successive semantic transformations. Leonor, age 65, Lat N. C. Chris. Fourth elaboration of the theme, the poem is semanticized critically, she says, she writes. And then I will read you the last two. And the next one is variation 25. This one is the one with no spaces between the words. So my reading of it will be relatively slow. She calls this a process of critical removal of semantic content through absolute agglutination, unprecedented reading proposition. Leo, Leonor, Leo, who knows Leonor does not know Leonor, unknown, for the not knowing of Leonor would be the non-existence of Leonor. Yet from the knowledge of her, Leonor is, and knowledge and the knowledge of him is hers, of beautiful Leonor, the beauty that is a knowledge of hers, of his and hers, because being beautiful Leonor is and known to him and her being. He and Leonor, who does not know, yes, who does not know, knows, not the beauty, the letter, and the aesthete says of her, I know her, she is beautiful, though he only knows the beautiful knowledge of her and her existence, who does not know, yes, who does not know from her beauty without knowing it. His verity and hers are not veritable, and the verdure eyes who does not know the beautiful verdancy, and the beautiful verities as lovely as Leonor, who for her beauty is well known, verdant rose and verity and verdancy and verdure and age and the city's acreage. It's not verity, the knowledge of the man, of the verdant. Yes, who does not know, especially you. Whoa, especially you, outside the city, through the ages, the verity of the pure verdure and dark and even cold, it is no verity. Leonor has no age, nor does the city, nor does know the beauty that is hers, theirs, the beautiful verities known. In the cities, who does not know them? Yes, the sources, also in the cities. Oh, don't tell me that they are not known, the unknown sources of all cities' acreages, through the ages within the verities of the beautiful and even lovely verdures full of roses, sometimes still verdant. Yes, who does not know them, does not know the beautiful image of the breeze through the leaves. It is no verity even in the city. There are so many sources and even some hills, and who does not know them knows not their knowledge and does not know either of them, nor the letters with which one later knows them, the breeze and the verdure and the unsure existence and the origins of sources. It is no verity, and even of cities, there are beautiful ones. They are theirs and hers and existent. Leonor, unsure through the verdure, yes, who does not know it, knows not Leonor, unknown, yet Leonor, unknowingly beautiful, from the knowledge of her that is she, Leo, Leonor, Leo. Whew, okay, I'm sorry you're not seeing what I'm seeing, but I will maybe show you again. I didn't want to cheat, so I really wanted to read it as it is. And the last one, the double acrostic, variation 31. So it has Leonor Ana on one side and Leonor Ana on the other side. Leonor, a reading, loyal, and literal emerita, devotedly, already to sense animus and the color, but since no name is sensed except during sleep, no, to read her name itself is all, or refer to what's being read here, being her, and thus the loyal and literal settles Ana, the animus normal for the Donna, a owning it beyond reading Leonor to read a. And Ana Hatherly describes this as a variation on the eighth elaboration of the theme, obscuring of sense due to formal and logical constraints. So that is Ana Hatherly. Thank you. Really wonderful work, and I'm happy to share the PDF if anyone wants to take a look at the original and the translations. So I'd be pleased to do that. So now I'm going to, just to cleanse my palette and yours, I will read you a note from repetition 19. It just has numbers back and forth in English and Spanish, and then I'll read you some of my translations. 14. 8, 5, 18, 4, 11, 16, 15, 19, 5, 18, 4, 17, 14, 10, 9, 12, 19, 2, 1, 9, 7, 8, 17, 11, 6, 15, 16, 6, 10, 7, 13, 13, 3, 12, 1, 20, 20, 25, 25, 25, 24, 24, 21, 22, 23, 23, 22, 21, 2. Looks like this. And that's an annotation for one of the translations, which is what I call just a departure of the poem, the original poem called Equivalencias, Equivalencies. And so this one is translated as numbers are qualifiers. Ablaze, twofold mirrors seeing in and out during sleep. A, B, and C, and consequent deals between parties. Sooner than you know, 3 becomes etc., a way of living, or the route that a computer operating system follows through directories on a disk to locate a file. A noun 4 times and nothing done. What are you doing burning through layers? Ask 5 times and eagerly. Then flee, just go, zeros and ones. Here. Here is another translation of Equivalencias titled Bird Watching. And this one, I also have a key actually. And I do want to say this, that anyone who knows that I translated Ana Hatherly would think that I got an idea, that I organized my book just like she does with a key to what I'm doing with each procedure. But I actually translated her after and discovered her work later, which was fascinating to me, because I think had I known her work before, my own process would have been really, really different. So let me see. I'm lost now. Bird watching, 12. Yes. So this translation I'm about to read you is a rewriting of the poem in a different context. Only visible objects in the room in which the translation was performed could be written about or written into in the poem. Bird watching. Behind the sliding glass door, a cinder block wall, puerta corrediza, bloque de ceniza, demarcates a small concrete patio, tangible. Tangible. A window-shaped opening frames a shrub, oportunidad, of many branches growing on the slope, sucursales, or is intended to frame, incriminar, if intentionality can be attributed to a whole. The shrub, like all living things, surpasses the wall's edges, barreras. 2 dirt-covered outdoor chairs, autoridades, of a hue sombra of blue, triste, that wavers between deep sky blue and azure, ondear en medio de, facing each other and empty, vano. Their colors mirror su carácter, the plastic in the abandoned dustpan and broom at the outer edge perdido, tilting toward the soil as if to sweep it up, redada. The cleaning liquid solvents discolored the chair's autoridades. 3 chemical agents account for the faded hue desvanecido: denatured alcohol, methyl alcohol, and ethyl acetate. 4 continuous discrete sounds, estrechos, all announcing nothing: a screech, a hammering, a siren, a buzz. Nereida, cuchicheo, telefonazo. Totaling 5, hacer chatarra, the top edges, the nervios, of the patio's walls and an angular adjacent roof jut against the landscape to bring geometry into sharper focus. The building knows what to do there. Penetrante. Okay, so this translation has an annotation that I will read you, and Rachel will hear it twice because I think she just heard this one last week, so that's interesting in a totally different context. On bird watching, a poetics manifesto and a translation creed. Vallejo's Trilce 36 is a statement against correspondence. It's anti-symbolist at its core. Throughout Trilce, expression reaches such a degree of idiosyncrasy and differentiation that's as if Vallejo had written some of the poems in a private language. In the essay Variations on the Right to Remain Silent, Anne Carson argues that one way out of commonplace and cliché is catastrophe. I quote, "We resort to cliché because it's easier than trying to make up something new," end of quote. Neologisms stand for the science catastrophe. They're at the edge of a known language, sounding the limits of the expressible. They're untranslatable. Trilce, Holderlin's Palaksh. Most of the poems in Vallejo's Trilce dwell in that liminal zone. Nonetheless, I found myself wanting each word and idiomatic phrase in my translation to correspond to the original, to be its equivalent. A more fitting approach would have been to attempt the opposite. It would have been non-compliant, insubordinate. Then again, a more appropriate translation would have complied with Vallejo's call to refuse symmetry, and in that sense, been obedient, agreeable, a catch-22. The etymology of harmony, according to the Merriam-Webster, is the following: Middle English harmony, from Anglo-French harmonie, from Latin harmonia, from Greek joint, harmony, from harmos, joint, more at arm, as in an arm, a limb. Trilce 36, so here's my translation. It's dedicated to Miguel de Cervantes. We strive to go through a needle's eye at loggerheads bent on winning. The circle's fourth angle almost ammonifies itself. The male going on female due to probable breasts, and precisely due to that which won't bloom. Are you there, Venus of Milo? You're barely impaired and trailed within the plenary arms of existence, of this existence still hoisting perennial imperfection. Venus of Milo, whose severed, uncreated arm twists and tries to elbow itself through greening, gurgling pebbles, rising nautilae, yets that have just started crawling, immortal eaves, lazoer of the imminent, lazoer of parentheses. Refuse, and you as well, to set foot on the twofold security of harmony. Refuse symmetry for sure. Intervene in the conflict of ends battling in the most heated of jousts to leap through the needle's eyes. And so I feel my pinky as an add-on to my left hand. I see it and suppose it is not me, or at least that it is where it shouldn't be. And this enrages me and vexes me, and there's no way out except pretending that today is Thursday. Yield to the new odd, potent with orphanhood. So I have another translation that's the result of the procedure in bird watching, and it's titled Updated Prior Inscription. Behind a gliding glass door, a wall made of blocks of ash demarcates a small tangible patio. A window-shaped opportunity frames a shrub with many subsidiaries growing on the slope, or intends to incriminate if we can attribute intentionality to a whole. The shrub, like all living things, surpasses the border's edges. A couple of grimy authorities outside, of a shadow of sadness suspended amid deep sky blue and azure. Before one another and hollow, their character mirrors the plastic in a dissolute dustpan and broom at the outer edge, tilting toward the dirt as if to raid it. The debt-free agents distress the authorities. 3 ghosts behind the vanished hue, non-naturalized, methane-derived, once associated with ether. 4 continuous, finite channels, all announcing nothing: a screech, a hammering, a mermaid, a ring. Wrecking 5. The superior nerves of the patio's walls in an angular adjacent roof jut against the landscape to bring geometry into an invasive focus. The structure knows what to do there. And the note for that translation reads as follows. Birdwatching, the previous poem, suggests a path towards asymmetry and noncompliance. Updated prior inscription is its execution. A disjointed translation infiltrated by the foreign and not non-germane to the subject. One that resists the policing of the transfer of meaning. It refuses one-to-one correspondence as well as narrow notions of equivalence by welcoming non-normative meanings, the ones that theoretically do not fit the context. Predictably, the authorities show up. As for borders, where does the poem begin and another end? And I will read you one last translation, and it's a bit of a long one. And just to orient you, I will tell you the procedure or the parameters dictating how I arrived at this translation, and it's the following. So this was culled from a transcript of a conversation held by participants in an English to Russian translation workshop moderated by Matvey Yankelevich at the Flying Inn in Moscow on March 22nd, 2018. During the conversation, participants Georgy Martirosyan, Sergei Spodotnov, Lena Vanayan, and Ekaterina Sakarkiv were in the process of collating their translations of the original from memory in order to produce a collective Russian version of the poem, all from memory. The conversation was transcribed and translated into English by Elena Mironchuk. Now, so she transcribed the conversation they were having when they were trying to remember the poem I had read to them in English. And it was transcribed, then it was translated into English. And from that conversation, this poem emerged, but it's not verbatim. And I'm calling it, I was having a flashback. Silence, scent, omission, wholeness. 1 cup of coffee, 1 abyss, or 1 blackness in an abyss. There is some chasm, and there is only 1 abyss. 1 burrow, the word whole. Cup, burrow, abyss, then trace in the mirror. A hole on hiatus. Pit in a pit, a hole in a hole. Hole in the gap. Or the other way around, a gap in the hole with a W. A hole in a hole creates deficiency. It's a play on words. By the way, what is the difference between the two? A hole is just a hole, either a black hole or a burrow in the ground. A gap is a precipice and its meaning can be figurative. Abyss in abyss? Perhaps we can translate one of these abysses as a verb, to disappear into an abyss. A sip of coffee before the feeling of bitterness. If I understand correctly, silence and coffee were before the sense of bitterness. They ruined the poem. You know, like Derrida says, translation is ruin. That's what I do in my translation. A whole is number 1, as if the blackness were an all-encompassing unit. About the blackness, is there a color component? A gap in a property of a whole? Hiatus and abyss is too metaphorical. Abyss on hiatus. Tuchev. One of these words can be switched for something more human, a collapse in a hole. 2 children in the mirror become enemies. Now there are 3 of them. 2 kids or 3? 2 children come out into 3. 2 rows. 2 children become 3. Don't remember how that happened. I wrote down that there was one path, and inside it were 3 roads, or maybe one path with 3 branches. I don't remember this line very well. I don't remember either. I just saw it as 3 possible ways to walk one path. 3 roads and 1 path. Were there any other objects besides roads? At night, 2 fires light up. It might not have happened. These memories might not have been. Phantom retelling. Okay, when the night comes, fires light up. 2 fires. And what was after the fire? Children. There were 2 children. One of them is either an enemy or an accomplice. They become enemies. How? Through the mirror. I've written 2 children exit into 3. What about they exist and see? I will write 2 variations with see and exit. 2 children see, the third one exits. How do you say accomplice in Russian? I think it's very important, connected to children. I'm not a huge fan of the word accomplice. They are multiplying from 2, 3, 2 children become 3. From 2, the third is visible. There was a mirror. 2 mirrors? How many mirrors compose 2 mirrors? The mirror is a medium that provides an opportunity for multiples. There was just a mirror in its reflection, like a number, duality. And why don't we like 2 children see 3 children in the mirror? 2 children are walking and seeing, simply the natural way. When we take out the verbs, we are waving some kind of. In the poem itself, we had more narration, but for some reason, we can't recreate it. So we have 2 mirrors, 2 roads, 3 roads and 1 path, 2 fires lit at night, and 2 children. Are we going to add some action here? If we don't remember, let's leave it alone. Let's do this. 2 children are walking on a street. Why on a street? There was a street. And what is the next action? The third one comes out. 2 children are walking on the street. They see the third one come out. This is a very Russian version, like detective fiction. So we have 3 children seeing a real third person, but when I was listening to the poem, I thought they saw themselves as 3 people. They just triple. 2 children are walking and tripling. The word triple in Russian is bad in this case. They triple and get upset. 3 people, some kind of villain. 3 open books, 3 specks of salt. Next event. Let's keep going forward. 4 is the same as 2. What do you think? 4 is also 2. 4 is 2. Also, there was 4 of something, either 4 mares or 4 nightmares. I'd like to have both because in English, they're almost the same. There is doubt, uncertainty. Most likely we have nightmares since there is a bed further in the poem. Let's write 4 mares / nightmares. Next, we have writers. We're forcing the writer and maybe he doesn't exist. And what's up with the bed? They burn their bed 4 times. Burn and cut. 5 times you ask yourself, what am I doing here? Set your bed on fire, let it burn and fall apart. Break up. Leave the building. Everyone remembers the 5th one. Everyone remembers a little different. 5 times the question, what am I doing here? If you ask 5 times. And then the bed? Burn the bed 4 times. Oh, like the proverb, burn the bed 4 times. Does it really say burn? Yeah, set it on fire. Set the bed on fire 4 times. It's calmer that way. Depends on your temperament. Of course, people have different likes. I think I heard an imperative. This is a gendered moment. We can use an infinitive as middle ground. So to light on fire 4 times? No, let it burn. Is this the finale? Then split, let it fall apart. Let it become ashes. It can't fall apart after a bonfire. I think split is not used in the sense of walk away from each other about 2 people. In American English, split might mean to leave, to flee. Oh, so it's not about 2 people? Not to smash to pieces, but to leave. I nod as if I understand. Is it happening with her? Not her. I mean the author. Someone is leaving. Now we're just deciding whether the separation happens with the bed or these strange people. They come together and separate. There are 2 or 3 of them. Maybe it will be more interesting, even if it's a deviation of the original. After all, we are working from memory. So walk away relates not only to the action or this action, but to the whole thing. The equivalence, the concordance. If you ask yourself 5 times, what am I doing here? Set your bed on fire 4 times and let it burn. Completed action or incomplete action? We're walking away from each other. I'm back with divergence, not because the title of the poem is also a noun, but because some kind of process is taking place. And at some stage, the differences turn everything into ashes. There's an end to the differences. All turns into nothing. And with that, I end. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like I've been taken on this journey. A little over halfway through, I started thinking, well, where have I been? And I've been to places: scientific, mathematic, poetic, linguistic, historic, aesthetic, diurnal, numerical, aviary, borderland, lyric, biological, geometric, artistic, imaginary, harmonic, overdetermined, undetermined, metonymic, metaphoric, structural, voyeuristic, participatory, uncanny, anti-authoritarian, procedural, Russian, conversative, holistic, differential, atomic, atmospheric, cosmic, silent, deconstructivist, familial, tripartite, dualistic, pyrrhic, disintegrative, and regenerative. And I love going to all those places. Kenny, do you have something to say to complete this?
Yeah, just so great to hear it read aloud, and some things came out for me that weren't there before. It was really quite wonderful. And I there's a passage in your work where you do the words with no spaces, and after having really tried to do that with great difficulty, it was great to see you labor to do it yourself with somebody else's. It's wonderful. Yeah, this is terrific reading. Thanks so much.
I had a moment in those translations where I first asked myself, do I really want to hear the explanations for each variation at the beginning? But then after a while, seeing how you were having to work through it too, I almost felt like, oh, even though there's this scientific and mathematical aspect, there's still the unknown coming through and the unknowable coming through. It was really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, no, those notes are amazing because they're so cryptic in a way. They mean something to her, or maybe there's, I've read a lot of her work and I haven't encountered that language in other of her poetry. She has a really wide range, as even just that series demonstrates. From going to the concrete to the asemic writing and handwriting. So yeah, that would just in itself be a really interesting kind of essay to take on to try to establish the correspondence between her annotation or description of the process and the actual process that she used in the translations.
There was a line towards the end that was meaningful to me where you said a gap in the property of a whole. And I love that. And you could read the whole there as H or WH, either one. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming. If I think you can take a moment and say goodbye if you want to, but we will probably definitely close it by 2:00 to have no more than an hour here. But if anybody wants to say something else before we go, please do.
Oops.
If we wanted to get a hold of that PDF you offered, how would we do
Yes, I can actually, can I put it in the chat? Does that work? I can try to.
Yeah, and I can then move that to the YouTube video.
Okay, let's see. Here we go. Okay. It's not copying on profile. I see, no wonder. Sorry, not to keep you while I do this, but Do you know how to do that? I've tried to share files in the past, and I thought I could just drag them, but that doesn't seem to be working.
Probably not unless it's already in the cloud with a integrated thing. If you want to, just send it to my email address.
Yes.
I'll put it on the YouTube video.
Okay, great.
It's in the chat now.
Great, thank you so much. I will send it.
Hearing the thing aloud, I just had a sense also of how great and how important the numbers are to it. Mm-hmm. It's got a quality of enigma for sure, and it's got just like a slight air that's never satisfied of the esoteric or something. Like the numbers must, there must be something lurking in the numbers that never quite emerges.
You mean in hers or in mine? Or
in yours, I was thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I was just thinking of the fact of the hand, mm-hmm. and the factor of 5 being 25. So that's why there's 25 translations, but nothing more than that. But I love how numbers themselves correspond and don't to the things they designate. Like you want to keep thinking that whatever they that there's something essential to the number itself that is empty and full at the same time, if that makes any sense. Thank you really so much. This was lovely, and I can't tell you how much I just enjoy being in conversation with you, and that introduction made my day.
Thanks so much, Mónica. Yeah, it's a great reading. It's wonderful that we got you to choose on one way or another. Right. Everybody have a good afternoon. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mónica. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great to see you. I'll see you at the next. Amazing. Oh my God, what a lineup. So you'll see me.
Great. Cool. Good. All right. Have a good afternoon. Bye.
Bye.